The Promised Land by Kathy Jones. Hornsby Heights, 2077. Narrated by Chloe Schwank. "We're off to the Promised Land," said Dad. "Hurry, you dingbats, get ready and jump in the car." Dad had taken the E.J. Holden station wagon out of the garage and reversed up the driveway. He leant out the car window with a cigarette in his hand and told us to get a move on. My dad never spoke quietly. He was a romper-stomper of a man. When he said move, we ran, or else you felt a whack on your backside. Mum got into the front seat holding baby Phil and sat next to Dad. I climbed into the back seat along 3 of my other siblings. Whoever got in first held firmly onto their spot. The prized seats were the window seats, which meant there was always squabbling, pushing and shoving from the 2 kids in the middle. There weren't any seatbelts in the station wagon, and when the car went round corners, we leaned as hard as we could into one another. One of the kids would eventually climb into the back of the station wagon and slide freely around. I remember this long, hot, boring drive in a car with no air conditioning. Dad and Mum chatted about their plot of land on the coast. I played endless games of I Spy with my siblings until Michael, the eldest, would tell Christine, the second youngest, that she was a dummy because she couldn't spell. It was not her fault. She had only just started school and was in kindergarten. She would howl. Dad would yell. I felt sick. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we arrived at the coast. Dad said, "Kids, take a look at this, our own piece of paradise." We thought he was loopy. All we could see was bush, rocks, and a few gum trees on a very steep slope. Big deal. This looked just like the bush at the back of our house in Gordon. Mum stood with the baby on her hip and wiped sweat off my father's brow and said, "Greg, I think we should drive down to Copacabana Beach and buy the kids ice creams." Dad looked at this rocky, uncleared plot and said, "Ice creams for now, but next weekend we'll start work and clear the land." We got our ice creams and drove home. A quiet road trip as all the kids and Mum had fallen asleep. The next weekend, Dad bundled us all into the car and drove to the land, as this is how he referred to this rocky dump of land. Dad opened the boot of the car and gave each of us a shovel and said, "Kids, it's time to clear the land." Crikey, slave work. So began a weekly chore, a long drive with hard work clearing rocks and cutting back branches. We would get a treat of ice cream and Dad talking endlessly about this glorious land. My folks never built a house on the land. They talked about it often, but it never happened. They had no money to build. The land was so steep. I can't recall ever standing on level ground. We were left dreaming of this holiday house. My father was not interested in camping, and we never put a tent up or stayed overnight on the sacred ground. The Promised Land was almost forgotten. Dad stopped driving the family up to the Central Coast on weekends. He now had us all working in the backyard of our family home. We were clearing the lower level of our own leafy, rocky yard. I spent hours with my sisters Anne-Marie and Christine as we leveled the ground. My brother Michael acted as the overseer with tape measure and spirit level in hand. We were rewarded for this hard work not by ice creams, but with the installation of an above-ground Clark swimming pool. Years later, my oldest brother Michael wanted to take a few of his mates and camp on the land. They cleared a space and put up a tent and hiked each day to the beach. As he was too young to drive, my mother drove him up to Copacabana, left him with his friends, and returned a week later to bring him home. Not long after this, my father lost his job. There was talk of a recession, and my parents had to sell the hallowed ground. We drove up one last time to the family plot to see if a for sale sign had been put in place by the real estate agent. Hang on a minute. Something's not quite right. The sign was not on our land, but on the one next to it. What dopes! We had been clearing the neighbour's land all these years. So much for the promised land. Now 50 years has passed since that day when my father's dream of the Copacabana beach house was shattered. The money from the sale of the land was used by my mother to pay for private school education for me and my sisters. My daughter and her husband and 5-year-old grandson now live in East Gosford. They own a house on sloping terraced ground in the middle of a rainforest. Her house is not far from Copacabana Beach, a half-hour drive, in an air-conditioned car with child restraints and seatbelts. When I visit my grandson, I often drive along the coast and look at all the established houses in Copacabana and Avoca Beach. They are built on steep hillsides supported on pillars, and I remember the heartfelt dreams of my father and imagine what life could have been if we'd ever cleared the right land and built that holiday home. There is no promised land. We must all work and treasure each and every day as though it is the first day on planet Earth. Love and remember those who are no longer with us. The end.